When we are communicating, communication is not just about us. Transformative communication is not just about being able to say what we mean, because communication is not a one-person activity. There's another person involved. When we communicate skillfully, we are able to enter a place of unity or connection with another person. But how do we do that when the other person is not communicating skillfully with us?
I don't like to argue, so I say nothing and fume for days.
How do I set boundaries without sounding like a jerk?
I hate the idea that I might accidentally offend somebody, so sometimes I'd just rather say nothing at all.
Welcome to the Language Alchemy Podcast, and thank you for joining me today. This is your host, Alejandra, a transformative communication teacher and coach devoted to helping you have more peace and more harmony in all your relationships. Whether you've been listening to this podcast since I started it, or whether this is your first time listening, I welcome you. And I want you to know that today I am going to share with you something very important, something that I was only able to understand after years of not just studying communication, but working with thousands of people and their communication. When I started helping people with their communication, I taught them what I had learned. I only teach what I know for sure. And what I knew for sure back then was that you could transform your life by learning to speak authentically. And honestly, I was getting good results from my students and clients. They would tell me how confident and empowered they felt to be able to express what's true for them, and that they were very satisfied with what they were learning. But as the years went by helping people speak authentically, I started noticing that they would come back to me with a variation of the following question. Alejandra, how do I communicate with people who didn't study with you, who didn't work with you, who didn't come to your workshop or your retreat? And I realized that even though I was sharing what I had learned, most of the workshops, courses, programs on communications I took, most of the teachers I had taught me the same communication skill, and that was to speak. I learned to express myself, to speak authentically, to voice what's in my heart and mind, and that's what I taught others. And of course, that was tremendously useful. And when we are communicating, communication is not just about us. Transformative communication is not just about being able to say what we mean, because communication is not a one-person activity. There's another person involved. When we communicate skillfully, we are able to enter a place of unity or connection with another person. But how do we do that when the other person is not communicating skillfully with us? That led me to what I want to share with you today. How do we communicate skillfully with someone in our family who has an opposite political view? How do we communicate skillfully with our partner when we already know that they don't agree with us? Or how do we communicate skillfully with someone, like a client, when we feel uncomfortable, triggered, or furious with what they're saying? How do we enter that place of unity? Because, see, this is the transformative power of communication, to be able to be in a place of unity, not only with the people who attend the same personal transformation workshops we go to, or have the same political views, or share similar beliefs, or are in agreement with us. And that is the communication skill that we don't often hear about, or that we don't hear about often enough. That communication skill is the skill of listening. I wish that in my many years of communication study, my teachers had taught me that skillful listening is as important, or perhaps even more important, than skillful speaking. As time went by, I started learning more and more about my listening and experimenting with my own listening. I became very interested in any book or article I could find related to listening. I started paying attention to the people in my life I enjoyed being around. And you know what I discovered? These people were skillful listeners. I started learning from different teachers who were not necessarily communication teachers, but were great teachers. And what did I discover again? They were skillful listeners. The more I listened, the more I learned to listen, the more others wanted to be around me. Even if they knew I had different political views, a different diet, different spiritual beliefs, or different ideas about the world than what they believed in, the more I learned to listen, the greater my relationships became. In my marriage, in my friendships, and in my professional life. And of course, after learning to listen, I started teaching my coaching clients to do this too. And well, the outcome, it's been precious. Couples who were about to separate found a new sense of joy and love and chose to stay together. Families who were heading towards estrangement were able to experience closeness again. People who were feeling lonely and isolated learned to have friends and even form communities. All because they learned to listen skillfully. The thing is that when we learn to listen to another human being, we include them. And when we include another person, we make space for the response or reaction. And we understand that the response or reaction is not a problem. It's just communication. And so we learn to stay connected to the other person when they're reacting, when they're triggered, even if we ourselves are also triggered. We learn to stay grounded and avoid shutting down, but rather remain open to the other person. And we learn to stay cool and calm even if the other is hot and angry. We learn to stop taking it personally. And all this helps us enter a place of unity with another person. It is listening, the skill that helps us heal the divisiveness in our hearts, in our families, and in our communities. It is listening that helps us enter that place of unity. But don't take my word for it. I have a little exercise I'd love for you to try with me. Recall an interaction in your life, even if it was something very brief, which was really enjoyable for you. And as you bring that interaction to mind, imagine you had a 360-degree view of yourself and the other person. And as you watch that past version of yourself and the other communicating, notice what the other person is doing. You probably see that the other person is fully there with you, very present, making space for you, letting you be as they are at that moment. What they are doing is that they're listening to you. And now, imagine you could perceive the internal experience of yourself back then. What was it like for you to be part of that interaction? How are you feeling at that moment? Most likely, you felt calm, happy, safe. If so, that means that the other person was listening to you. Because this is what happens when we are listened to. We feel safe to be who we are, which means that we feel safe to express ourselves authentically. We feel more calm, which means that we experience less stress and reactivity. And we feel happy, which leads us to feel more connected with others. And this is what happens to others when you learn to listen to them. I've spent the last few years working on a one-of-a-kind communication course on listening, and I'd like to invite you. This is a 6-week online course called Choosing True Connection, learning to listen without losing your cool, taking it personally, or giving up who you truly are. You can find out more information at languagealchemy.com/enroll. Registration is open until April 19th. In this course, you will transform the way you listen, connect to yourself and others, and stay grounded no matter how others talk to you. There are 3 ways of taking the course, and payment plans are available. To enroll, just go to languagealchemy.com/enroll. I will add the link in the show notes. Now, let's recap what we've discussed in this episode. We talked about how useful it is to learn to speak skillfully, and I shared that this is what most communication programs and teachers offer. I also shared with you about another communication skill that is not often taught, and that is the skill of listening. We talked about the importance of listening, the powerful transformation many of my clients experience when they learn to listen, and I guided you through an exercise for you to remember what it's like when someone truly listens to you. Finally, I invited you to a one-of-a-kind communication course on listening. My wish for you is that you may be open to learn to listen, because that's where the gold of communication is. Thank you so much for listening. And a special thanks to my client Claire for all the work she's doing to learn to listen with greater capacity and skill. Until next week, and as we say in Argentina, ciao ciao. Original music by Gary Lapoe. You can find all links in the show notes at languagealchemy.com.